blind bidding, stress test, cooling off period, and a homebuyer's bill of rights. Ah yes, these will fix the Canadian real estate crisis. But probably not because they are well thought out policies. No, but because they are catchphrases and buzzwords put out into the universe by people who keep their jobs from putting out buzzwords and catchphrases. And even after we prove that each one of them has lied yet again, they talk us right back into believing their hype every 4 years or so. But because most people out there think that realtors like me are only out there to get you, and government is actually here to make really smart decisions, idiots like me are accused of only looking out for myself and not my clients who I owe a fiduciary duty to. But all that stops here and now, because in this video, I'm gonna stop being part of the problem and start being part of the solution. And I'm going to do so by not only going over those catchphrases that have been put into the ether by current government, but also inventing a few of my own buzzwords in order to enact maybe some sort of policy that might actually help in the future. And because nobody out there in the Canadian YouTube real estate world has nearly as much influence as I do, you can help me get this information out to policymakers just by clicking the like button for the YouTube algorithm. And if you yourself are a member of government or employed by one of the regulating bodies like the BC FSA, you too can subscribe to the channel right now to stay up to date on what's really happening here in my market of Surrey and the Fraser Valley, but also provincially and across the whole country. And if I can reach my goal of enough lawmakers subscribing to this channel, hopefully they can start introducing some policy that might actually help, rather than policy that just sounds good and helps you stay employed. What do you think? Too harsh? Just a little. Well, I'm passionate about local real estate, so what can I say? And now let's get on to policies being chosen by buzzwords and some buzzwords of my own. Okay, first off, let's talk blind bidding, one of the biggest buzzwords that's out there. And I want you to know that the idea of eliminating what we've called blind bidding or the multiple offer situation here in my market of Surrey, BC and the Fraser Valley or across the whole country is absolutely the most ridiculous idea ever thought up by any level of government, either local, provincial, or federal. You see, when the market is hot, it's easy to think that
it's just not fair. I can't get into the market. I wish I knew what everybody else was offering so I could offer more.
And well, if you want to learn anything more about blind bidding, I've got plenty of videos on that particular topic. But do you know why blind bidding was brought in the first place? Because in a regular market where things are much slower, having every other buyer know the terms of your offer that you're privately offering to another seller could actually put you at a disadvantage. Think about it this way. If you're offering the absolute maximum that you can to get the perfect home for you and your family, and now your offer is disclosed to another party that has deeper pockets than you, well, they know now they just have to toss another few hundred or maybe $1,000 on the table or give the seller the dates that they desire over top of your dates, and they win the offer, making the whole process of open bidding
just not fair. I can't believe it. Am I ever gonna get into a home?
So in my opinion, the idea of eliminating blind bidding and replacing it with an open auction system should be taken off the table completely, because I am not in favor of other people knowing the privacy of my clients, whether that be the buyer or the seller. And myself and many other agents are very much against the idea of then giving the advantage to the person with the deepest pockets, knowing that they can just offer more than any other offer and get the property for sure, rather than doing their due diligence and putting forth an offer that they determine to be market value. Because in my opinion, giving an advantage to one party over another is discrimination. And well, I think that's something that we should try and eliminate from our country. The second buzzword I want to go over is something called the stress test. Now, this is actually, it shouldn't be called a stress test, but I guess it's simple to talk about. It is the situation where you actually have to qualify for a mortgage at a higher rate than you will actually receive from the bank. This is one policy that was brought in a very smart manner, not because of the situation where I think it's necessarily giving me freedom of choice to do what I want, but I do see how it does protect the buyer from themselves, because again, it shouldn't be the seller thought of as the big terrible person. The buyer should be able to limit themselves and know what their payment should be. However, a lot of people don't do that. So this is actually one where the government has stepped in and said, no, I'm not going to disadvantage someone else, but I am going to protect you from yourself for spending too much. So stress test, great policy, and I would love to see it continue. The next one is actually one that is currently being introduced by the BC government. We don't know how or if it's legal yet or when it's coming in, but we have been told indeed it is coming in, and that is the cooling off period. A cooling off period is a buzz phrase for the buyer having a right of rescission. That means they can walk away from the contract at any given time for any given reason with no consequence to them. Again, I find this discriminatory because at this point we are giving an advantage to a buyer over top of a seller, and we should be putting zero advantage to either party. So I think it is stupid and it should not be put in place. However, we have been told that yes, indeed, it is coming to BC, whether or not we like it or not. So I'm going to propose that when they do bring in the cooling off period, that they piggyback it with the catchphrase, no tire kickers. That's right. My no tire kickers policy goes a little bit like this. I believe that a good way to slow down the market is to limit the amount of offers that are offered on any one property at any given time. So we don't want the tire kickers who are just tossing in an offer if they get a good enough deal, because that's actually driving up the market. There is a way to eliminate tire kicking deals, or what could be called frivolous offers, but frivolous offers is a little bit harder to say and not nearly as buzzy as tire kicker, so I'm sticking with that one instead. A frivolous offer already happens a little bit in the market, but it will be much more prevalent when the buyer has to show no reason for actually walking away. So my no tire kicker clause would actually require the buyer, when offering on a property and getting accepted, making the deposit payable at that time. You see, a regular deposit here in my marketplace is usually around 5% of the purchase price, and that money is held by one of the real estate brokerages until the transaction completes. If you had to come up with $30, $40, or $80,000 deposit for a property when you wrote the offer, you would not likely be in a position where you can write 10 offers in a weekend. So what you would do in my no tire kicking clause is you would write on the one property that you actually wanted to get, and if accepted, you would immediately pay your deposit. Now, if you didn't go ahead with the property because, again, we brought in the cooling off period, you would get your deposit back. However, there's a very low likelihood that you have 5 or 6 or 10 $40,000 deposits just sitting around to spatter around all the offers and all the properties that you looked at this last weekend. But if you don't like my no tire kicking proposal, maybe we can tweak the cooling off period just a little bit, and let's have that cooling off period be fair for both parties. Meaning that if the buyer feels like walking away, they can walk away from the transaction at any given time. But should we then not bring in a cooling off period for the sellers, meaning that if they regret selling their property to that particular buyer, or they receive another offer in the meantime for more money, shouldn't they also then get the right to back out? Because they've also made a very fast and hasty decision worth a whole lot of money, one that they may regret. So maybe we should have a mutual cooling off period benefiting both parties, not discriminating against any party. Next, I'm going to bring up a topic that the BCREA has actually pitched to the government that has fallen on deaf ears. And the reason it has fallen on deaf ears, in my opinion, is we don't have a buzzy enough catchphrase for them. The suggestion that the BCREA made was to have a mandatory property disclosure statement for every single property provided to the buyers, and that the seller was not allowed to not fill out that paperwork, which they currently do now if they don't live in the property, or if they simply don't want to make a disclosure and are trying to cover something up. So instead, I'm going to call this a catchphrase policy, mandatory seller transparency. The BCREA made a great suggestion. Every single owner of every single property should not be able to simply not make a disclosure based on if they want to or not. You are selling a property and the buyer is acting in good faith. Therefore, you should also act in good faith. But currently, if a property is being rented, the seller just doesn't answer any questions at all. Why is there not a rental property disclosure statement that still lets the owner answer the questions that they should have knowledge of, and maybe not the ones that a homeowner would have knowledge of if they were living in the unit? Or even better, why don't we hold the seller to a higher standard and have to find out that information that is on the property disclosure statement, such as, has there been a leak in the property? Has it ever been used as a grow up? Or are there any material latent defects? If you cannot answer those questions as a seller, you should not be able to sell your property. And that's what the BCREA suggested. And unfortunately, the BCFSA and the NDP government have ignored. Another thing that the BCREA did suggest that is an absolutely beautiful thing, but was pitched completely wrong, was a 5-day mandatory on-market listing. What they had proposed was if you brought your property on the market, you would have to be on the market for 5 business days. This would at least carry through 1 weekend, maybe 2 weekends, before you could look at any offers. However, this was pitched incorrectly because most people are saying at this current time,
well, don't sellers just hold off on offers for 5 days anyway? Isn't that what we're already doing?
Well, sorry, BC REA, you didn't use a catchphrase, but I'm going to name it for you. We're going to call this one the no bully offer policy. You see, being on the market for 5 days is what most sellers were doing. They were actually holding offers and not looking at them until a certain day. That was a very good thing for them because they're going to get all the buyers through and likely sell for more. But it does, in fact, give the buyers due diligence periods, of which most buyers don't take advantage of. They do have the time to do it, but they don't take advantage of. And then they set an offer date of, let's call it next Monday. So they've been on the market for 5 days. Now, only 3 of those or 4 of those days maybe were work days, so that does need to be stretched. However, in the meantime, if the listing agent received what we call a bully offer, which is an early offer, it is still our duty to present all offers, no matter what, as they are received, even if we've set a presentation time. Now, if the seller wants to deal with that offer, there's a bunch of hoops that we need to jump through, but it does put a ton of pressure on the seller and other buyers if they're interested in getting into the market. So if you bring your property on the market Monday morning and you have it go through the entire first week and through the next weekend, and you will not look at offers until the following Monday. If we make it illegal to look at an offer in advance, then a lot of those buyers, or all of those buyers, have a lot of the pressure taken off. And now, if they're willing to do their due diligence in advance of the offer presentation time, they have the right to do so. And that leads me to another policy, which apparently is going to be brought in at some point in time by the federal government, even though they don't make laws about real estate, and those are provincial. But either way, we're not going to worry about that little detail about legalities of these things. And that is what they are calling the right to a home inspection. Now, in conjunction with my anti-bully offer or no bully offer policy that I propose we bring in, why not enforce the seller having to have the property open for inspectors for 2 of those now 7 days? Make it an absolute requirement that the seller must give access to the property for 2 8-hour periods for any inspectors that would like to come through the property before the offer period. This would give everybody plenty of time to book way in advance. The inspectors could all be lined up, let's call it 3, 4, 5 days in advance, and they could go in at the cost of the buyer and perform a home inspection. Now, some people say the buyer shouldn't put out the $500 it takes for an inspection in advance of an offer. Well, I'm not going to play nanny state here. If you're trying to buy, in my market, a $1.5 million home and you can't afford $500 of due diligence, you shouldn't be buying a home. Well, many buyers feel that the seller should pay for the home inspection. And, well, let's think about that for a second. If I'm being hired as a home inspector by the seller to provide a report to buyers, it would actually be a negative for me as the home inspector to find anything in that property that would put my own client at risk. So I would suggest that relying on a seller's home inspection is not something you should do as a prudent buyer. And the last one I'm going to bring up that is apparently being brought in by the current Liberal government is the Home Buyer's Bill of Rights. And you know what? I'm totally in support of this. I love the idea of everybody having a Bill of Rights. However, in the mindset of trying to eliminate discrimination, if you are going to introduce a home buyer's bill of rights, it needs to be in conjunction with a home seller's bill of rights. Because if it's not, and we're not protecting both members of the public, well, just remember, for every one of you home buyers that's currently going to be protected under a new home buyer's bill of rights, you are equally going to be discriminated against when it's time for you to sell. And trust me, you're not going to like it down the road. I'm interested to hear if you agree with me or if you have other ideas that might actually help our market rather than just keep politicians in power. And might I point out that all of this is a moot point anyway, because the current market is slowing and interest rates are rising. Because the only thing we really need to do in order to slow down the market is not lend 1% mortgages to people. Who ever thought that would have gone bad? If you're interested in trying to sell your home before BC brings in their mandatory cooling off period that will only hurt you as the homeowner, you can book a call with me right now down below in the description with just a few simple clicks. And if you're looking to buy real estate, while you're down there in the description, you can also download my Informed Buyer's Guide. Thank you for watching. Please remember to click the like button, subscribe if you're a member of government and you want to learn a little bit about real estate. Check out another video before you go, and we'll see you in a couple of days.